Believe it or not, despite its presence on the market for over 13 years, I've somehow managed to miss out on Red Dead Redemption. This Western open-world epic was originally released in May of 2010. Marketed as, in the most simplistic terms, Grand Theft Auto with Cowboys, it had significant boots to fill, especially considering it was developed by Rockstar San Diego, a sibling studio to Rockstar North, developer of the GTA franchise. Sure enough, Red Dead Redemption trades busy city streets for wide-open plains. It's got the guns, it's got the grit, does it have the goods?
This here's what's left of Fort Mercer. Some gang rode in and took the place over.
So I understand.
You play as John Marston, a former outlaw turned government errand boy after his wife and son are kidnapped by the powers that be. The only way to get them back is to hunt down and eliminate some of John's former gang members who previously left Marston for dead in a botched robbery. This task proves to be far more complicated than initially expected, leading John on a wild goose chase that finds him entangled in far more than just his initial conundrum. Throughout the course of the game, you'll find yourself helping to manage a ranch, fighting off a local gang with a small town marshal, and even turning the tide of a Mexican civil war. John Marston is an immensely likable character, despite being a murderous criminal. He's impressively level-headed and patient, even when forced to help yet another eccentric local with their problems. Pragmatic and determined, John rarely loses his cool, and when he does, it's for good reason. He's a man who seems to regret his past life and takes little pleasure in any of his current accomplishments. Ultimately, all he wants is his family, and will stop at nothing to get them back. Despite the gravity of the situation, he somehow manages to conjure up countless witty retorts along the way.
Move up, mister. Time to get you to a doctor, or an undertaker. Whichever you need once we get to town.
St. Peter, open up them pearly gates! I'm coming home!
And that way is circuitous, to say the least. With almost 60 main story missions, Red Dead Redemption certainly isn't lacking in content. Unfortunately, with such a long narrative, the plot tends to lose focus, often traveling down various tangents that ostensibly exist just to make the experience longer. Thankfully, the writing and performances are strong enough to make whatever task John's currently undertaking interesting. A game's script often feels like an afterthought, but not so in Red Dead Redemption. It upholds the extremely high standards set by Rockstar and makes pretty much every character likable, even if many of them are despicable people. It also manages to be something most games aren't: funny.
I just been up in the canyon, spying like you said. I think I seen me a couple of them rustlers. I think it was the Ballard twins and a couple of Mexicans.
They up there right now?
Well, it was a group of 4 men rounding up Mr. Gulch's livestock, and none of them looked like any of Gulch's hands, so yes, sir, right now.
That sarcasm's most unbecoming, Eli. It's gonna hold you back in life, even worse than your lazy eye.
Rob Wiedhoff delivers a fantastic performance as John Marston, as does every other member of the cast. Even small characters are voiced by actors talented enough to carry an entire game if they needed to. Rockstar carries a reputation for top-notch storytelling and, barring the pacing issues, it maintains its status here. Red Dead Redemption places you into a sprawling open world, imposing few restrictions on your outlaw escapades. Your map screen displays the available story missions, but if you're in the mood to just set off towards the sunset, you're free to hop on your horse and get riding. Once you visit a place of interest for the first time, you can fast travel there moving forward, but I usually opted to ride to my destination in real time. Riding horseback provides a welcome opportunity to soak in the natural landscapes, and you never know what or who you might find along the way. If you ever become separated from your steed, you can always whistle to bring it back in a snap. While you begin with a default horse, you can purchase other breeds as you progress the story and acquire more money. There are various individuals known as strangers strewn throughout Red Dead's world, each with their own request for John if they're paid a visit. While they typically lack the grandeur and stakes of the story missions, these side quests are compelling in their own right and contribute to the believability of the world. Exploration in general is consistently rewarding. As you adventure, you may encounter a robbery in progress, an animal that can be hunted, or a bounty that needs to be captured. You don't have to engage with any of these occurrences, but doing so rewards you with money, items that can be sold, or points towards your honor and fame. 2 separate meters that increase as you complete story missions and assist people in need. Increasing these metrics provides you with persistent bonuses, like preventing citizens from reporting you for minor crimes. If you decide not to be so upstanding, you'll lose honor, and if you break the law in a populated space, you'll be pursued and forced to evade the police. Get in enough trouble, and you'll have to pay a fee to get the bounty off your head. All of these various attractions and systems make the world of Red Dead Redemption feel alive. There's no doubt that more recent open-world experiences have surpassed Red Dead in this department, including its own sequel, but it's clear that this game served as inspiration for what's come since. As alluring as the world can be, sooner or later you'll find yourself back in the search for John's targets. Red Dead's story missions will place you in all manner of situations. They begin innocuously enough, tasking you with herding cattle or clearing rabbits from crops, but it doesn't take long for the stakes to raise. You'll soon be faced with numerous adversaries, whom John prefers to speak to with lead rather than words. Expect many a shootout as you make a name for yourself across the countryside, be it with one of John's standard arms or, on occasion, some bigger options. Interestingly, as often as you'll be shooting, you'll be conversing. Many missions find you traveling from one area to another with another character by your side. While this may sound disinteresting, there's no shortage of interesting conversations that take place, another area that highlights Rockstar's excellent script.
Do you exist outside my mind? Maybe we're both having the same dream, and when we wake up, we'll die.
I certainly seem to be in some kind of nightmare.
On some occasions, you'll even have to fight off pursuers while on the road. With such a long campaign, variety is key, and Red Dead Redemption mostly nails it. You rarely find yourself in the exact same scenario more than once, which keeps everything feeling fresh. That being said, you eventually start to realize that most missions consist of the same basic ingredients, with different seasoning thrown in to spice things up. The context for cover-based shooting in this mission may change from that of the last, but it's still more cover-based shooting nonetheless. Regardless, the game is bound to surprise you on more than one occasion. It took me about 15 hours to finish Red Dead Redemption with 70% completion, but clearly, there are many stones I left unturned. As I mentioned previously, you'll be doing a lot of shooting during your time with John Marston, as words can only get you so far in the Wild West. Your life drains quickly, so getting behind cover is a necessity. Snapping to cover is very reliable, and from there you can pop up with your weapon of choice to score some headshots. The game features generous auto-aim, so as long as your gun is pointing roughly in the right direction, you'll usually hit your mark. If you're still struggling to emerge victorious, you can utilize an ability called Deadeye that upgrades as you progress through the story. At its zenith, it allows you to slow down time and select multiple targets for rapid-fire gunslinging. At times it can feel a bit overpowered, but it does require a cooldown after too much use. Gunplay in general feels solid enough, but the weapons lack a certain weight and recoil present in the best third-person shooters. Controlling John outside of combat isn't as serviceable. General movement is pretty standard stuff, but sprinting is inexplicably mapped to a face button that must be mashed to keep John running at top speed. This is extremely annoying, and as far as I can tell, you cannot reconfigure the control scheme. If I'm mistaken, please let me know, as I'm more than happy to eat crow. Sprinting in games is a solved problem, almost always mapped to L3. Mashing a button just doesn't make any sense, and the problem is exacerbated when you're exploring interior environments, as your thumb has to constantly switch between controlling the camera and moving John above a snail's pace. One could argue that this is a nitpick, but it's in these nuts and bolts that Red Dead Redemption really begins to expose its age, or perhaps just Rockstar's stubbornness. Control quibbles aside, there's no area of Red Dead Redemption more draped in antiquation than its presentation. Its textures have never looked sharper in this most recent port, but a lot more work needed to be done to bring the game into the current decade. Draw distance is limited, character animation is stiff, and lighting is flat. I've no doubt that the game was a looker back in 2010, but times have changed. The audio fares better with its Western-inspired soundtrack providing appropriate grandeur and surprising restraint when necessary. Of course, it's really not fair to compare a game of this age to modern standards, but if 2K wants to charge $50 for it, well, that's exactly what I'm gonna do.
You're a persistent little cuss, ain't you?
Only when things matter.
Red Dead Redemption emerges as a Jack, or perhaps John, of all trades. It operates at a very high level on many fronts, but isolate any one of Red Dead's individual elements, and you can likely find a game that executes it better. Regardless, its writing, world building, and mission variety help to make it greater than the sum of its parts. Over the last 13 years, the tumbleweeds of time have perhaps worn Red Dead Redemption down from greatness to goodness. Nevertheless, when the call of the Wild West beckons, you'd be well advised to answer.